Shalom, shalom, Israel. Welcome back to another edition of Stick to the Script Current Events. My name is Shamar Yah. To my left. And tonight, it's current events, aka Hebrew news. So we are going to be getting into, and we apologize for the late start. We are going to be getting into some of the recent things that have been happening, both abroad, internationally, as well as here in the States. Some things even all the way coming back to LA as we kind of close it out, bringing things closer and closer to home. If you are not keeping up with the news, you definitely should. Christ already said these are going to be the signs and the warnings of when he's going to be returning. And a lot of things are transpiring rapidly. I mean, you can look up, get on a news page, get on a feed and refresh the page, and it's all type of stuff that'll be there that just wasn't there a moment before. So let's take it over to the PowerPoint. Let's start off with some alien motherships. Pentagon officials suggest alien mothership in our solar system could send many probes to Earth. I'm going to read a couple of key things here real quick. It says Pentagon officials. So keep in mind, there have been so many signs in the heavens that the Pentagon has had to scramble to release statements and documents. And it's so much that the Pentagon is unable to keep it under wraps anymore. You know, they've gone from UFOs to UAPs, UFO, unidentified flying object. But it was becoming so popular. You know, you had a lot of we believe, they're out there groups and in a sense, cult followings that were amassing that they then started calling these what we know to be chariots, right? They started calling them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenons. So Christ already said, like, there are going to be signs and wonders in the heavens. There are going to be things that we're able to see that are going to be happening. So he says, Pentagon officials said in a draft document last week that aliens could be visiting our solar system and releasing smaller probes like missions conducted by NASA when studying other planets. A draft research report authored by Sean Kirkpatrick, director of the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. I mean, look at that. All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. You wouldn't even think, first off, you don't know what that is, most of us, and you're not thinking to look there when it comes to finding information about these things. That handles all domain anomalies. And Abraham Leob, chairman of Harvard University's astronomy department, was released on March 7th and focuses on the physical constraints of unidentified aerial phenomena. An artificial interstellar object could potentially be a parent craft that releases many small probes during its close passage to Earth. So they're saying these artificial interstellar objects could be motherships for aliens, right? And they're saying that this is very possible and this is actually the same one. Very possible and happening right now, right? It says the AARO was established in July 2022, very recently, and is responsible for tracking objects in the sky, underwater, and in space, or possibly an object that has the ability to move from one domain to the next. An artificial interstellar object could potentially be a parent craft that releases smaller drones during its close passage to Earth, an operational construct not too dissimilar from NASA missions, the report read. These dandelion seeds, as they've been called, could be separated from the parent craft by the tidal gravitational force of the sun or by a maneuvering capability. So they keep trying to leave this space. You caught that? They keep trying to leave this space as if these things could be still interstellar kind of phenomenon, right? A comet with a tail, a comet with broken pieces, these kind of things. But they also said at the end, or by a maneuvering capability, which means it can fly and be piloted. So they're saying a lot of these things that are happening in space, these objects that are being captured, these things that are being seen, they could potentially be being piloted. And they're admitting this, right? It says, on October 19th, 2017, the Pan-STARRS detected an unusual stellar object that was later named Oumuamua or scout in Hawaiian. I don't know. I probably probably butchered that pretty bad, but they called it scout. They're calling this an interstellar object, right? I think they deemed it a comet, but they're naming it the Scout. Why, in the same report that they're saying these interstellar objects could potentially be ships that are potentially being piloted to observe things that are happening on Earth, and then when they found a huge, what they tried to call a comet, they named it Scout. They already are telling you this is a scout coming to Earth to observe. It says, and then look at the description, right? It says the object was cigar shaped. I believe that's like a tube, right? And it was propelled away from the sun. So it came at least from behind or from the actual sun itself. Without showing a cometary tail. This is very important. This is probably the most important part of the article. The object was cigar shaped, appeared flat, and was propelled away from the sun without showing a cometary tail. So let's just stop there real quick. Most of the time when you have comets, they have a tail, which is essentially ice, big chunks of rock, things that are being burned off as the comet is propelling, right? This one does not have a tail. So there's nothing breaking off of it. There's nothing that's come. It's not. It doesn't look like it's a comet. It doesn't look like a standard interstellar kind of phenomenon. It's not something that's normally observed. They usually have like a streak behind them, and that's how they're observed through telescopes. This one does not have that. Listen to this. Leading scientists to believe it was artificial. They think that this humongous cigar-shaped object that was propelled away from the sun is not a rock. It was created by someone or something. This is what the Pentagon is saying. This object was created and is more than likely being piloted. I mean, wow. Like, I read that it was mind-blowing. Like, they're openly admitting, yes, these things they're being flown. They're being piloted around. This was created. It's not random. And it's fascinating because there's actually, like I said, there's so many different movies that already explain or at least capture some level of concept. Let me see. Take it back to the PowerPoint real quick. This is a 2016 film, one that I really enjoyed, called Arrival. And it was literally about these ships. There were 12 of them that arrived in different countries and continents around the world, and that each one of them contained, I think it was called a cephalopod, meaning a seven-legged creature. So it was like the 12, the 7, and they were trying to communicate with humans to warn them. And the crazy part about it is they were warning of a future war, but the reality is these are warnings. They're warnings to be able to get right. They're warnings to say that Christ is coming back. These are the scouts that are going to see what the situation is before Christ's return. You see that commonly being happening in the scriptures. You saw when we came out of Egypt how Moses sent spies to see the land. Go and look, see what it's looking like. Bring us back some fruit. Bring us back a little bit of this, of that. Basically, you're taking samples. Where do you think NASA got these things from? They're leading missions to other planets with rovers and things of that nature, getting samples, taking pictures, observing the climate. Where do you think they got that from? Our people have been doing that. And clearly, the Most High does that. These things are being sent to Earth. Smaller probes are breaking off. That's where you see all these so-called UFOs. That's where you're seeing all these phenomena, the UAPs and all that kind of stuff, all these different titles that they've given them. This is where it's coming from. These larger ships are coming close to Earth, and it's crazy because I've seen so many of these, and I haven't really been covering them because all of them are always about, and I think I've covered some like some years ago, but all of them are typically not going to come to Earth, right? They're just like, oh, this huge comet's going to come really close to Earth, but don't worry, it's going to miss us by like this many million miles or billion miles, but that's fairly close considering how huge space is. And then now they're saying, well, all these comets that have been coming close, are likely dropping off probes, basically motherships, right? Dropping off smaller ships that then go um, into Earth's orbit and then potentially are landing all the time. It says the report also said 6 months before Oumuamua made its closest approach to Earth, a meter-sized interstellar meteor, IM-2, crashed on Earth and exhibited an identical speed relative to the sun at large distances in an identical shape. So it basically shot off a smaller version of itself that landed on Earth. And they keep calling these comets, but they're not. They're saying we believe that this is artificial. This was created. There's some technology involved. There's no technology involved on a comet with a cometary trail. It's just a big rock that's pretty much breaking apart as it flies through space. This is not that, and the Pentagon is openly admitting it. With proper design, these tiny probes would reach the Earth or other solar system planets for exploration as the parent craft passes by within a fraction of the Earth-Sun separation, just like Oumuamua did, the authors wrote. Astronomers would not be able to notice the spray of mini probes because they do not reflect enough sunlight for existing survey telescopes to notice them. So not only are they arriving, but they're arriving discreetly. They don't even know how many are already here. They don't know how many are already walking amongst us. And do not the scriptures say many have entertained angels unaware? Many. So when you see, instances like where Lot, all these angels that have spoken with our forefathers, they went to Lot, they went to Gideon, went to Mary and Joseph. You see angels being a part of our culture really at a certain point because the Most High used them to be able to speak, to minister unto people, to protect certain people, save certain people. You see this happening all the time. And as we're nearing the time of the end, of the return of our King, Yahweh Shai, you see these very same things happening, that all these probes are being sent to Earth. Who knows how many angels are already on the ground as we speak that are walking amongst us? You don't know who you're interacting with. You don't know. Sometimes we be like, man, what a strange interaction. And some of them are weird, and some of them kind of make you think. I wonder who that was. I wonder who, why would they say this? Why would they say that? You be at the right place at the right time and hear something that stands out to you, and it's almost like someone's talking to you, and they might not even be looking at you. Warnings. Maybe some to repent, maybe some showing destruction, but all of these things are happening, and the Pentagon is saying, like, yeah, it's pretty much so far beyond their control. They don't have the control anymore. They're not able to conceal it. They're not able to hide it, and they're openly saying these things could be happening all the time. We can't even see them, and they're moving fast. Whew. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So I just wanted to bring that out because that was extremely fascinating, and like I said, it's very clearly showing that they're very much so as angels that are amongst us, maybe all the time. And the scriptures talk about the signs of heaven, things that are going to be happening. We've had how many blood moons, right? How many of these signs of heaven have we seen? These strange-looking clouds, trumpets in the sky. You can get on YouTube right now and see countless videos of people just recording a trumpet coming from the sky and being amazed and confused. Where is that coming from? What is this? Man, look it up. Oh. So we're going to bring it a little more human. A little close to the earth, a little more of what's going down here on the ground. Israeli fighter jets escort U.S. bomber over Israeli airspace in message to Iran.
Israeli F-16 fighter jets escort an American B-52 bomber as it makes its way through Israeli airspace towards the Persian Gulf in an apparent show of force to Iran amid lingering tensions in the region. Mm-hmm. The flight took place as a part of close cooperation with the U.S. Armed Forces, which is a significant component in maintaining an aerial security of the state of Israel and the Middle East, Israel's defense forces said.
So as these tensions, one of the things that happened, right? You had something called the Soviet Union, right? The Iron Curtain. That's where all these countries that are in Russia that are currently their own separate states, they used to be a part of Russia entirely. And so I think like Kyrgyzstan, Ukraine, A lot of these cities that are currently being battled over, they were once already Russia's territory. So America's painted it out as if Russia is doing something horrible, invading some land that has never been a part of it. It's actually just reclaiming its own land from the West, really. And so this is sparking a huge, a lot of conversation, a lot of war talk amongst all these leaders, right? Because all of them are pretty much having to draw their lines, pick their allies, and America, I think Canada, I think the EU, they're all in support of Ukraine. They're all in support of the, NATO, right? That's like Ukraine is protected by the West. They've adopted a lot of the West mentalities. They've adopted a lot of the commerce, a lot of the internet, the expulsion, the what do you call that? The culture, right? McDonald's and Burger King and strip clubs and all that kind of stuff. A lot of the things that are in America, when America goes and gives all these countries all this freedom, they implement all of those things. And so the traditional people who live in those countries are disgusted by these things, and that's one of the reasons why like Putin wants to take this land back so that it could be once again part of the Soviet Union. So go ahead.
These countries are sick and tired of the U.S. coming in and feeding their communities, feeding their citizens Babylon's wine, like the scripture said. They're sick of it. They're tired of it. They see what's happening in the West. They've seen the decay of traditional values. They see all the BS, liberal rights. People deciding that they want to be, the opposite sex. People deciding that they want to, do things. They want to do whatever they want, whatever makes them feel good. Right? There's no more honor. There's no more order. It's just chaos, and a lot of these countries are not interested. Right? And Ukraine happens to be one of the countries that is drunk off Babylon, right? And Ukrainians are basically Russian. Same people. Right?
Yeah.
And what Putin wants is to be able to bring his people back into the fold, bring them out of the drunken stupor of Babylon.
Yeah, they are Russians. They speak Russian. I think there's a slight difference in their dialect, but that would be the equivalent of like a Californian going to like the South or something. Like we're all speaking English, but they got a little bit different of a slang. That's the only difference between these people.
It's really crazy because if you ask a Ukrainian, what their heritage is, what their lineage is, they'll all tell you, oh, few generations back, we migrated from Russia.
I don't even think it's a few generations. It was like like the 80s or something?
Right.
Like the Iron Curtain fell very recently. This isn't some huge, like, hundreds of years, and there's been like this huge separation. I mean, that happened in the 1900s, and I think the mid to late 1900s. Ukraine has not been an established separate country for that long at all. And all this time, like you said, it's been getting drunk off the wine of Babylon, traditional morals. And I mean, think about that. As an older man, if you start seeing boys, or young men being feminine, being effeminized, being fed certain things, being, just all these differences.
Taught certain things, men turning away from traditional roles that men had, traditions and understandings that men gave to their sons in order to keep society functioning in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
You'll definitely feel some kind of way about that.
Exactly. And so all of this ties in, and let's get Matthew chapter 24 real quick. And all of this ties in because this is one of the countries that is also, right, drunk off of Babylon's wine. And they're sending messages to these other countries. Because what you really have is you have a lot of countries, peoples, that believe in tradition, right? They believe in their gods. They believe in their culture. They believe in a certain standard. A man has to be this. A woman has to be this. There's no blurred lines. There's no crossing over. They still have arranged marriages, things of that nature. And America comes along and says, no, freedom. Let everyone choose. But then you have to keep in mind, these arranged marriages with these younger men and women that are actually virgins being given to each other no longer exist. So now you have a non-traditional woman who's had who knows how many men, a non-traditional man who is not providing. He's not a stable in his household, in his community. He's not what a man should be. He's not leading. He's not. He's going. He's running through women. You have a lot of chaos, and they're watching their societies and their cultures deteriorate rapidly because of this so-called free thinking. So a lot of these countries are not welcoming that. But because America carries the biggest stick, what they'll do is, oh, you don't like this? Just fly a bomber. We'll just fly a bomber a couple miles away from where you are, and we'll let you decide what you want to do. And then when all these citizens are looking up, seeing this huge bomb, I believe this is the same type of bomber that dropped the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, B-52, I believe. I could be wrong on that. But it's a bomber with a huge payload capability. It can carry in like an insane amount of weight and bombs. And as a show of force, the country that it's flying in, they commissioned some of their jets. Can we turn this mic down just a little bit? They commissioned some of their jets to protect, to escort the American B-52 bombers. Pretty much they showing an allegiance. They're showing we have the bomb, and they're showing, well, we're supporting this. Let's go to Matthew 24. Let's get verse 6.
This is Matthew chapter 24 and verse 6.
Uh-huh.
And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass.
He said, don't be troubled. Don't worry about these things because you're going to hear about it constantly. And sometimes I do just have to, sometimes I get really interested and I'll read article after article. And then sometimes I'll be like, man, I need to put this down because I'm stressing myself out. Third article in, my chest is tight. I'm like, oh man, when is it going to happen? Because it's close. It's very close. Like all of these things that are being talked about, all of these movies, these shows, like the doomsday prepper is no longer a conspiracy theorist. It is a already prepared person. It's already someone who's prepared. You know, people saw that show Doomsday Prepper some years ago, right? It was like on Discovery Channel, I think. Hulu picked it up. All these different networks have kind of carried it for a little while and dropped it. But those are the people who have been preparing for years for what they already knew was going to happen. And now here we are. The reality is setting in. Wars are constantly being talked about. The power grid is crazy strained. Last summer, just regular, I'm not talking about some type of attack, some type of war. It hit 107 in Compton, I think like 110 in LA. Power grid was like that close to shutting down. And no AC, no comfort, but then also what's up with your refrigerator? All that food that you're stocking up, that deep freezer that you have stocked full of meat. If the power grid collapses, what's going to happen? But we'll get to that in just a moment. So all these things are taking place. He said, look, don't be troubled because it's not the end yet. They talk about all these nukes that they could drop and all these things that they could do. He said, that's not the time. So let's read this real quick. It says, Israeli F-16 fighter jets escort an American B-52 bomber as it makes its way through Israeli airspace towards the Persian Gulf in an apparent show of force to Iran amid lingering tensions in the region. So they're really saying, like, what's up? Yo, we heard y'all was talking. You want this? We'll fly a bomber a couple miles off your coast. How you want to handle it? And you can scramble a jet if you want to, but they have F-16s ready. This is basically like a big guy walking through, and he's got some goons with him. Like, we ready to shoot down. We ready to shoot. What you want to do? It says the flight took place as part of close operation with the U.S. Armed Forces, which is a significant component in maintaining the aerial security of the state of Israel and the Middle East, the Israel Defense Forces says. Israeli jets escorting American bombers have become a regular fixture in the skies of the Middle East in the past year as tensions between Tehran and the West have risen amid stalled attempts to negotiate a new deal that would block the Islamic Republic from obtaining nuclear weapons in exchange for sanctions relief. So they're trying to get pretty much cheaper goods because they're just trying to survive. And as an exchange for getting these goods from America, America's like, okay, we'll give you what you need, but you got to take away all your nuclear weapons. You got to reduce it to this. Because pretty much what they're doing is we're going to give you the power to survive, but we're not going to give you the power to fight. And that's how America keeps a lot of these countries docile. And that's why you see, like, Russia won't kiss the ring. They have, starving citizens, food shortages. They have things that happen, But they don't want to kiss the ring of America because America wants to give you all these things and disarm you in the same process. So because the Middle East is no longer interested in being disarmed, they can't reach a deal to relieve them of their sanctions. Okay, that was pretty much the entire thing. So we're hearing about these wars and these rumors of wars. We're seeing these things occur all the time. This isn't even the only one. Look at this. Russia loses 1,090 soldiers and reported deadliest day of war. 1,090 people died in the same day. Ukrainian troops killed more than 1,000 Russian soldiers in what could be the deadliest day of fighting since the invasion of the country more than a year ago, Kyiv's military said Sunday. In a video shared by General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, spokesperson, Oh, okay, come on.
Alexander Stupin.
Alexander Stupin. Claimed that Ukrainian forces killed 1,090 Russian troops on Saturday. Stupin also commended the elimination of 8 Russian tanks, 7 armored fighting vehicles, and 4 artillery systems in the fighting. So, go ahead.
No, I'm just always wary of reports like this. Just because it's not. This is one side reporting on what they did to the other side, right? So it's. I usually take a third of that, and it's maybe that number. That's more of an accurate number.
Yeah.
But,
Very possibly, but I will say that the Russian state does do a lot to try to protect its image. Like, I was recently watching Chernobyl, right? It's on HBO Max. It's in a show/movie format, but it's kind of a documentary because it's a step-by-step of the nuclear meltdown that occurred in Chernobyl, like 1986. I think it was like April or May in 1986. Very recent again, right? Yeah. And they literally said, they were arguing because they were like, look, we got to keep this quiet. And that was one of the reasons why it had gotten so bad, because it took so long for them to respond to what was happening. Right. Everyone was trying to protect themselves. Everyone was trying to look good. Everyone was trying to protect the state. And so even now, there were an insane increase. I'm talking like maybe like tens of thousands of % of an increase of cancer rates, organ failure, contamination, all that kind of stuff. And the official Russian death toll of the Ukrainian or the Chernobyl meltdown was like 3,000.
Right.
So, while other estimates are like 100,000, 150,000, there were like 650,000 people just involved in the cleanup. It got so bad that everything was so radioactive. Some people, their body was melting from the radiation because it's an insane amount of radiation. It's invisible, right? A lot of the scientists and doctors that were involved that helped were dead shortly after. The firefighters that were actually involved at the nuclear reactor itself were dead within the week, a lot of them. They pretty much had melted from the inside. And they were saying, like, look, the reason why the state, this is what the Russians were saying. They said the reason why we have so much power is because of the perception of our power. So they were like, we can't just let this accident be widely broadcasted or we're going to lose a lot of our power. So that's one thing I will say is Russian numbers typically, I'm not going to say across the board, and I don't, of course, that's even propaganda because I'm pretty sure that's an American-produced show. But it was so bad, it got to a point, everything was so radioactive, they commissioned people who were in the military to just go and kill animals. They're like, look, every dog, cat, cow, horse, whatever in this region is radioactive. Right. And if it is allowed to reproduce or get out, it can, they would just literally walk into communities and all the dogs come and they just start shooting because they need to kill all the animals. So it was insane. So I kind of trust some of the numbers, but at the same time, of course, an army telling its own story is always going to be a grand story. So I get that too. There's some of the images from the war that's been happening. And a lot of it has been artillery. Just insane artillery fights.
I don't know that we'll ever get a true and accurate story of what is actually going on in war. The thing that I know for certain is that war anywhere is lucrative to the people that are funding the war, typically the individuals or the organizations that are funding the war are funding the war because they benefit financially, and so everything else is just kind of theater at that point.
Yeah, I think I can't remember when it came out. A movie called War Dogs, starring Jonah Hill, and it literally just showed. Mind you, the reason why it's so fascinating is because a lot of these are true stories. Like
Right.
War Dog was a true story. I can't remember the guys that they played, but Jonah Hill and that other guy, I can't remember his name. But there was a real story, so it's not like it's just purely entertainment. This is something that actually happened. They were dealing. They had a lot of illegal, but not necessarily the worst thing ethically type of practices, and they were just buying ammunition and shipping it to various different places. But they were profiting huge amounts, right? They had millions of rounds of ammunition from from the Cold War that hadn't been used. They were, or actually it was Chinese ammunition in Russia. It was just all type of stuff that they were doing to be able to fund wars and profit billions off of it.
Right.
And of course, they made deals with the U.S., but the U.S. still had to convict them. So they ended up doing like a couple of years, but they were back in business when they got out.
Right.
The U.S. had to give them a slap on the wrist, make it seem like they had done something about it, but the U.S. was profiting from it.
Right.
They needed ammo, they needed weapons and all that type of stuff. So that stuff really happens, and there are a lot of people who will profit from war. War is a huge business in America. I think it's the biggest business in America. The number one thing that is the number one fund that is allocated out of American like treasury is war. It's the biggest budget that gets used every year. I think it's bigger than pharmaceuticals. Yeah, the defense ministry. I think it's bigger than pharmaceuticals. As much as medicine is a huge moneymaker, war is above that. That's probably the biggest thing that America invests in. It said, and here's another one. It says the latest fatality reports tops Kayev's previous record for 1,030 Russian soldiers killed overnight on February 7th, just weeks before the war's first anniversary on February 24th. So, and then you see it's a lot of propaganda. And Sun Tzu, The Art of War, he said all warfare is based on deception. So we really don't know what's happening. And you watch movies like Operation Mincemeat, or you can even read reports about it. There's always a war being fought behind the scenes of a war. That's a war of intelligence, making people believe certain things, leading people to go left so you can attack right, stuff like that. So, but we're hearing about these wars. You see reports of Russian soldiers being given fake equipment, helmets that are not protecting against ballistic, that don't offer any ballistic protection. They look like Russian soldiers, but are they Ukrainians speaking? Because they all pretty much speak Russian, and filming this on the battlefield to discourage Russian soldiers? Very possibly. It could all be propaganda. You're really not going to know until the outcome of the war, but that's what's being reported, so that's what we have to go off of. Let me see.
One of the things that I also know that's important, this war in particular, is the sentiment of United States, its citizens, in backing Ukraine, right? And so, a lot of these stories be, framed in that way to get your sympathy for Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely. Like America very quickly did the whole pray for Ukraine thing, the Facebook filter, the Instagram support, the donations, because that's one of America's allies. So they're always going to make Ukraine seem like they were so innocent and so needed to be helped so badly. They always make it seem like they need to be helped so badly. So, they're going to pump that out to citizens so that you'll donate, that you'll put more money towards this war because that's what's needed in every war. This one I'm going to hit briefly. I ended up opening up a different one because that one wasn't opening for me. This one I'm going to hit on briefly because Biden announces a nuclear-powered submarines for Australia. So all of these, because you already see the climate. Putin's talking about pushing the big red button. I believe North Korea is constantly showing signs of ICBMs that could overwhelm the U.S. defense system. They're launching missiles all the time to show that these missiles are ready and mission capable. They're pretty much, everyone's making a threat. Everybody. All these countries are making threats to each other. They're all loading up their guns and cocking their guns in front of each other so that they can see, all right, I'm ready to shoot. I'm ready to shoot. That's all this is over and over and over again. So in the midst of all that that's happening, all these Western and NATO allies are all making deals with each other. You need more. What do you need? Because everyone's preparing for this war. It's only a matter of time. Russia is going to war with Ukraine. Russia has friends. Ukraine has friends. So by helping out Russia's enemies, do you not become an enemy to Russia? By helping out Ukraine's enemies, do you not become an enemy to Ukraine? Imagine if you was in a fight and somebody was like, I'm not going to be involved, but that's my boy. So while y'all fist fighting, I'm going to hand him a knife.
Right.
Whoa, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Oh, that's how you doing it? But I'm going to give my guy some body armor. Oh, my guy's got a pistol now. It just keeps escalating. And then how long until the suppliers say, you know what, this would have been over if you weren't supplying them. If I could take you out, I win. You're not involved in the war, right? This person's fighting this person. A is fighting B, but C is supplying B, and D is supplying A. So how long until, I already messed that up. Just basically, the suppliers are going to start targeting each other, and everyone's going to get involved. And so while all these allies who aren't technically at war yet aren't involved, they're all making deals and supplying each other with the things that they lack. They're trading jets for helicopters, tanks for artillery. They're selling submarines because when the war starts, they all want to be prepared as possible.
I got a scripture. We're going to continue in Matthew 24. This is verse 7.
I'll read it for you. Verse 7, for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows.
So the important thing to remember is that this is just the beginning of sorrows, right? But in the previous verse, we saw that it says, see that ye be not troubled, for all of these things must come to pass. But verse 7, it talks about nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. That's exactly how that's going to happen, right? What's going to happen is like Shamar was saying, nation is going to be supplying other nations with the tools necessary to defend themselves and to fight the war, right? By one nation supplying another nation, you've already picked a side, right? The U.S. is trying to stay as neutral as possible. We're not sending our troops to Ukraine necessarily to fight Russia because we honestly don't want that fight with Russia. But we do want to protect our interests, right? We have interest in Ukraine because Ukraine has resources that are incredibly beneficial to the U.S., incredibly profitable to the U.S., right? The U.S. doesn't fight for anything that is not going to be profitable to the U.S. Mm-hmm. So any of these wars, anywhere where there's wars and the U.S. is involved, you better believe that the U.S. is involved, not because of the goodness of our hearts, right? But because there is something there to profit. Not our heart.
God, hold on, brother.
Not of the people who are making these decisions, right? It's not they're not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts, right? But it's because there are resources that the U.S. can profit from. That's why they're there. That's why we're in Ukraine. That's why we're providing billions of dollars and tools to help Ukraine fight against Russia, because the U.S. profits from the resources in Ukraine. We don't, 100%. We don't want to give that back to Russia. We don't want Russia to be able to profit off of, and which is crazy because we have no business over there. We have no right over there. That's not our people. That's not the U.S. Those aren't U.S. citizens. Those are Russians. Russia just wants its people back. Just wants what's rightfully theirs. So yeah, I mean it's you're going to have the U.S. is at some point going to be forced to defend the decisions that it's made to back back Ukraine against Russia. to back these other countries against China, right? It is inevitable that the U.S. is going to have to pay for the decisions that it's made.
100%. And yeah, 100%. And all these countries that have kissed the ring and have chosen to partake of the wine, that's why the U.S. will go fight tooth and nail as much as they possibly can. Because, they've already sent $40 billion before. There's billions upon billions, both of money for Ukraine to purchase its own weapons, funding or supplying Ukraine with American-made weapons, and then finding other allies. It's just you kiss the ring, you're having a problem. All right, daddy's coming to save you. That's literally what that is. I've been able to pimp you out, pretty much do whatever I want to you. You having a problem? America basically is a pimp. Are you willing to kiss this ring, bow down, and do what I say? You are? Okay, don't worry about it. And then all of a sudden, I'm having a problem. I'm coming. I can't really get involved. I can't send American troops. They're not sending American troops that are enlisted, but you had how many volunteers go? America is petitioning its own soldiers that are retired, so they're technically not active duty, but they've been trained by America's army. Yep. They still have American-made weapons, American-made armor.
American idolatry.
Right. And how are they getting over there? Probably jets that America's flying for its volunteers. It's just all a game and propaganda and BS, but it's all war too. We're going to briefly, I'll just read a couple of things from this. It said President Joe Biden, the leaders of Australia and the UK on Monday announced that Australia will purchase nuclear-powered attack submarines from the U.S. to modernize its fleet amid growing concern about China's influence in the Indo-Pacific. So here's another, China is not an ally to the U.S. China's not an ally to the U.S., and so the U.S. is supplying China's enemies. So when China starts to join Russia and has an issue, the U.S. is going to fund and supply Ukraine, fund and supply the UK, and anyone else that's willing to pick up arms and fight. I don't think we're going to go into a huge amount of detail. I mean, you can read the specifics if you're interested in it, but it's nuclear-powered submarines. I think that speaks for itself.
It's one part. Two parts. The partnership announced in 2021 enables Australia to access nuclear-powered submarines, which are stealthier and more capable than conventionally powered vessels, as a counterweight to China's military buildup. Biden appeared sensitive to tensions with China and its criticism of the deal, stressed that the submarines are nuclear-powered, not nuclear-armed, right? It says these boats will not have any nuclear weapons of any kind. He said in an outdoor ceremony at the naval base Point Loma in San Diego, where he was flanked by Albanese and Sanat. Two submarines, the USS Missouri and the USS Charlotte, were tied up next to the pier in the Pacific Ocean behind leaders. All right. Basically,
can you take it back to the PowerPoint? Because as he's reading, there's also a couple of images I just want to show. Go ahead.
So basically, while these vessels, these submarines are not nuclear armed, they're more advanced weapon. It's a more advanced weaponry system than Australia actually has currently, right? And it's not only to bolster Australia's defense, but Australia has resources that benefit the U.S., right? And so it is basically the United States by proxy of Australia defending the United States against China. So it's like the game Risk. I don't know if anyone ever played Risk growing up, but it's basically a strategy game where it's not enough for the U.S. just to arm itself, right? But the U.S. has to be strategic about who it arms and where it arms to counteract the so-called aggressions of these other nations.
We're going to start picking it up a little bit for the sake of time. Drug-resistant bacteria, I skipped the worms. If you looked it up, you can look it up. There was a phenomena of raining worms in China. Some speculate that they are like branches or like kind of like the seeds that came off of trees. Look it up. You can make your own determination. But because it's not clear, and for the sake of time, we're going to skip that one. Drug-resistant bacteria linked to recalled eye drop cost fire captain's sight in one eye. So as far as I know, it's actually killed one person, cost I think about 3 people. Some of them it was both eyes because they use eye drops in both eyes. Some of them it was one eye.
3
Oh,
people.
3 deaths.
Ooh.
Kind.
3 people have died and 8 others have lost their vision as a result of a drug-resistant bacteria infections linked to recalled eye drops, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The CDC warned against using Ezricare and Delsum Pharma artificial tears, which have been recalled due to the outbreak.
Jeez. And keep in mind, right? So many of now I'm not saying that these things aren't judgment, but so much of what we've associated with things happening, we've associated as this person did something particularly wrong, they were judged. You have to keep in mind, there's stuff that's happening all the time. And through the mercy and grace of the Most High, we haven't been affected. And all praises, because how many people use eye drops? One of them, it said a fire chief, Adam D. Sorrow, is the fire captain in Naples, Florida, who for years used artificial tears for dryness in his left eye. He never had a problem until last fall. He's been using it for years. Then it cost him his eyeball, cost him his sight entirely in one eye. So all of these things, that it's everyday stuff now. You don't have to be involved in some horrible criminal mafia-style rink to find judgment. It's happening all the time. The food we're eating, the eye drops, the air, things that you're not even going to think to check for, products that have been reliable for years, things that you've already been normally doing. Man, we got to be right. Or it could easily be, okay, it's time for this to happen.
This is the kicker too, right? He had been using this for years, right? For dryness in his left eye, right? What are some of the symptoms of dry eye? Redness, irritation, itching, right? So the symptoms that he's actually having from, whatever this bacteria in the recalled eye drops, he's feeling these symptoms, and so he's probably using more of the drops.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right?
That's unfortunate. And oh man. So the CDC is investigating a nationwide outbreak of the antibiotic-resistant bacteria, so it's not easily dealt with. Pseudomonas.
Pseudomonas, yeah.
Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which has infected 68 people in 16 states. So it's not even like a small thing. It's quite a few people that have been affected in a wide range of states. And I would imagine that those numbers are continually going up because this was the 23rd. Okay, this was today. But the last time I checked before today, I think it was only one person that died that I knew of, and now it's up to. I was fascinated by this. So do you like zombies? Like not even a little? Are you?
I'll be honest. I'll be honest. No.
Okay. Look, well, I've like, okay, zombie movies, zombie games, always very fun. What are the? Oh, did we just lose feed to the computer? We back up?
No, sir.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about this briefly because I've always been fascinated by it. Has anyone heard of The Last of Us? Right. Let me know when it comes back up for a favor. So this zombie, it was actually a recent show. So mind you, a lot of the things that have been happening, there's movies and shows that already showed it. We talked about that last month. A movie called White Noise, based on a book, I believe, written in 1986, released in like mid-2022, was about a train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. Professor who is living in the state at the time they're going through all these various different things. It ended up being really weird, honestly. The movie took a sudden and drastic turn to this existential crisis between the professor's wife, her desire to not die, a case of adultery. Like it got weird, right? But the phenomenon that the movie was based off of was a train derailment carrying a toxic substance in East Palestine, Ohio. And last month, there was a train derailment carrying a toxic substance in East Palestine, Ohio. So, one of the recent series that has come out, do we have feed?
No, sir.
What about now? Tragic. So, oh yeah, Colin. Hopefully, let's see if that works. What about now? All right. Well, we'll keep working on that, and then you just let us know we have feed. I'm just going to continue to
sir.
speak about this.
We got feed now, right?
No.
Oh, okay. All right, no problem. So the whole thing is this series, The Last of Us, right? It's already it's been out for years. I think the first game it was a game first. It was part 1, part 2 dropped in like I don't know, but years later, and then they recently made a show based off of it. Why this series suddenly gained so much popularity and just exploded like this, I do not know. Why it suddenly boomed in popularity, I don't know. But it has boomed in popularity just very recently. They came out with an HBO Max original, The Last of Us. If you are a fan of the game, and then you're like, oh snap, here's a show, and he looks just like Joel, and she don't really look like Ellie, but it's all good. And it's exploring, again, a very real and practical concept of how zombies were created. In the series, it was, first it started off with an interview, a conference that I think actually took place in real life, but it was filmed. They redid it so it could look modern. And it was pretty much, I believe, I can't remember if he was a scientist or the director of the CDC at the time. They were asking him what was the most likely scenario for a extinction level or cataclysmic kind of event that could realistically happen based on pathogens. So they're looking at bacteria, they're looking at viruses, they're looking at fungi, and they're saying, or actually, I think they asked him, they said, what disease are you most afraid of? What do you think is most practical? He says, to be honest, the biggest thing that probably scares me is fungus. Because there's a type of fungus that inhabits the hosts. And what it does is it basically creates a zombie out of the host that it inhabits.
Back up.
All praises. We're going to bring it over in just a moment. Originally, it was only taking over ants. That was probably the most popular. You know how small an ant is, though. But that's kind of impressive considering, the spores from mushrooms are usually microscopic. You might be able to see like a little poof in the air, but it's gone almost immediately. So it would grow so much in the ant, it pumps the ant's brains full of endorphins. So to the ant, it's just high, like incredibly high. Probably so high that it's the equivalent of a psychedelic because that's what mushrooms do. It creates an entirely different reality for you. So whether this ant in its mind is living in heaven or in hell, I don't know. But it has no idea what's actually happening to its body. And so the fungus would command this ant through signals in its brain to go somewhere high up, climb a tree, climb a flower, get higher up, and there it would pretty much just command the ant to die. It would shut everything down instantly. The fungus would grow out of the ant, produce a flower or a mushroom, which would then produce more spores and would infect more ants. So you see how, it could pretty much potentially wipe out colonies. In The Last of Us, that had happened with humans. Cordyceps, a common type of mushroom, usually dies in the human body because of the body temperature. However, because of global warming, this was according to the show, right? Because of global warming and a heating planet, in order to survive, the mushrooms were adopting a trait to be able to survive in hotter temperatures. And once it got too hot, they were able to survive within the human body. So it was something like sugar or flour, something where the mushrooms, these cordyceps, had gotten into, and the people who were exposed to it were almost immediately infected. I think one of them was sugar, so it showed like someone baking cookies, and that night they were full blown zombies. And then it just continued on into a widespread thing, millions upon maybe even billions getting infected, and then literally the show is called The Last of Us. It was the last of people who survived all these infections and were immune typically to the airborne pathogen, but not to a bite. And the zombies that were there, their only interest was to bite you, to infect you, so that the fungus could continue to exist and to live. It's not going to get to a point where it says, okay, I've got 100,000 people, I don't need to infect anybody else. It's determined to survive, and it will take everything it can. So instead of piloting ants and smaller bugs, it was piloting human bodies. So I found that fascinating. Can you take it back over to the PowerPoint? Because up until this point, it's only ever infected ants, and now it's able to infect spiders, which are significantly larger, right? And then what I think will happen next, and this is just assuming, I don't know for sure. This is just my speculation. If it can go from ants to spiders, it could probably go from spiders to the biggest spiders out there, tarantulas, wolf spiders, that kind of thing. Those things get eaten. They'll probably be in a bird, right? Maybe even a number of birds. Then the birds die and get eaten by a cat or a dog. Well, now it's in a cat and a dog. Those are pretty quick. I mean, hell, a bird's pretty fast. It can fly. If it's in a cat and a dog, if it's able to inhabit a body of that size, it's more than likely very easily going to get to humans. And that's assuming that it even needs to go the animal route the entire way. It might just be in a spider and go straight from humans to spiders, because some dogs have, at least as puppies, a higher temperature of a higher internal temperature than humans ever get. I think like puppies are like at 106. Humans are supposed to be at like 98. So if they infect a dog, it can for sure get into a human. So it was just a fascinating concept because, again, you see a lot of these movies that come out, a lot of these shows that come out right before these things actually occur. And it was just fascinating that The Last of Us, being a franchise that has been out for so many years, suddenly got this huge boost and all this funding behind it, talking about zombies and cordyceps and all these things that mushrooms could potentially do, how they adapted and how it became a basically extinction. Con. Oh, and look at this. Look at the first line.
With recent attention around the HBO drama The Last of Us and its infectious fungus that turns people into zombies, the timing of a recent discovery in a Brazilian rainforest perhaps couldn't have been better. Oof. Couldn't have been better.
Right, like we're supposed to be excited about this.
Like, oh, it's just... Mycologist Yao Arujo is one of a team of scientists who believe they have discovered new parasitic fungus that infects a species of spiders and takes over their bodies. It was amazing, as it happens, Arujo told As It Happens host Neil Cocasso. Arujo and his colleagues were doing research as part of a collaboration between England's Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, and the New York Botanical Garden, and the Rio de Janeiro Botanical Garden. He and his colleagues were walking in the rainforest north of Rio de Janeiro, actually crawling on the forest floor to see the low-level fungi when he came across something that looked like a mushroom stalk emerging from a hole. It was purple, he said. The purple hue was very unusual, said Arujo, who is the assistant curator of mycology at the New York Botanical Garden. He was quite certain they had stumbled on something previously unknown. The fungus was cylindrical. It looked like the stalk of a mushroom without the cap, and it was also quite robust, according to Arujo, measuring about 10 centimeters in length. It was a cordyceps.
Oh, look at that.
A fungus which typically attacks a host species, such as an insect, by using mycelium to invade and eventually replace the host tissue.
Wait a minute. Literally, this is what I'm saying. At this point now, this is like, well, is this really what's about to happen? In the show, if you have these things, like, go watch it. In The Last of Us, it was the cordyceps that did it. It was a cordyceps. And it got into like sugar, And the crazy part about it is, it starts off. This is the very first episode. It's not a spoiler that much. In the first episode, they were like, it was an autopsy being conducted, and then they went and got like a neurobiologist or a I can't remember the name of what they call the guy that studies mushrooms. They went and got one. She conducted an autopsy, and she found a bunch of cordyceps in this person's body. And she said, the factory that they were working in, this person had like bit 3 other people that were under observation and had all also exhibited the same behavior. And she said, "Are there any other missing workers?" They said, "Yeah, 14." Yeah, and then she immediately started shaking and just put her stuff down. And they're like, "What do you suggest we do?" She's like, "Man, like, go love your families, pretty much. Like, what are you gonna do about this?" It inhabits the host's body. Take us back to the PowerPoint real quick. It inhabits the host's body, takes it over, and literally will pilot the host. Let me see if I could pull up. I'm gonna pull up 2 quick things, and like literally after this, we're gonna just breeze through the rest of this because this is just crazy fascinating. What was it? Let me see.
Ruha said that what they discovered was the fungus was doing with a trapdoor spiders in Brazilian rainforest was even more interesting than the zombies in The Last of Us. Though he admits, as someone who has worked in the field for 13 years, he may be a bit biased. I live these fungi every day, he said, so I think they're amazing. He points to the fungi's ability to adapt and develop new ways to invade a new host. The truth.
Oh, hold on, wait. New ways to invade a new host. It's north of Rio de Janeiro, one of the most populated cities in Brazil and potentially in the world, that doesn't have an insane healthcare system, insane infrastructure, not very established, and who knows if there's already someone in the jungle who's eaten or is infected right now with a cordyceps. I don't, man, we don't know what's happening in these last days. We know some of what's going to happen, but that's just crazy fascinating, and I don't think it's a coincidence.
The true biology and evolution and diversity and the strategies that they use to infect the different hosts, from ants or flying wasps to burrow spiders, I think the whole story is beautiful.
Wow. So, and granted, he's a scientist. He's dedicated his life to that, so he can think it's beautiful. That's fine, but it's pretty insane. Like, switch this over to the PowerPoint real quick. This is an ant that has been infected by a cordyceps. So what it does is, obviously, the ant exhibits a really strange kind of behavior. What it will do is it'll pilot the ant. Literally, it's in complete control of the ant's body. It'll command it. It'll instruct this ant through signals in its brain to climb up somewhere higher so that it can start to release more cordyceps spores. And it teaches the ant to bite down really hard so it won't become dislodged before it dies. So you'll see these ants are biting whatever it is that they end up dead on. They bite it really hard so that the cordyceps can stay in place as it continues to grow out of the ant's body. Look at that. It bit down so hard it killed a little bit of the leaf right there, and then the fungi just sprouts out. And in The Last of Us, that was happening with the humans. This was called a clicker. So the cordyceps had infected a clicker so heavily, it would actually cause them to, pretty much, it would supply whatever it was for the host to survive. So they wouldn't really need to eat. They wouldn't really need to drink. They would have very limited need of like human resources. And clickers were infected whose cordyceps had covered their eyes. So because the fungus desires to survive, it needs to survive, its adaptation was to completely pretty much blind the person and then increase their hearing to an insane level. So making any noise around a clicker would instantly alert it. You could sneeze, you could cough, you could unzip your backpack, and it's going to hear you from like who knows how far across the room, and it's going to instantly run faster. They were usually stronger because it gave the cordyceps, this fungus would give it an edge because it was already at a disadvantage not being able to see.
Sounds terrifying.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Like, it is. And it's just like, wow, who knew that this was going to be something that was going to be fairly close to becoming a reality like that? Wow. Did you have anything else that you wanted to before we continue on, because this is one of those things I could talk about for a long time, but for the sake of time, we will not.
Y'all should definitely go out and do the research.
Oh,
Read about it on your own because it is actually pretty fascinating. Oh my god,
that's the spider. Oof.
that's crazy.
Yeah. Kills the spider. Like I said, it pilots it. So it's like it takes over. And then it'll kill whatever it is that the host was, and then it'll just make it start growing like this. And it's crazy. 'Cause this is also explored in the show. You would have people that died like the cordyceps just showed, and they would just glue themselves to a wall. So a lot of them would be piloted until their death. They would be, moving around trying to infect other people. But you had some that if they could not infect anyone else, the cordyceps, the fungus, would just command it to go stick itself to a wall. I have to survive. Make sure I survive. Stick yourself to this and just let me start growing.
That's
Just like you just saw with that spider, just like you just saw with that ant. It was doing it with human bodies. And they would just grow like crazy, just an insane amount of cordyceps to continue to spread.
this is the type of intelligence, like this desire to survive by any means necessary. Like this is an intelligent, highly intelligent thing.
Extremely intelligent. It's about as intelligent as humans. How do you, this is one more
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. There was, I believe, scientists in Tokyo, they took cordyceps, they took a fungus, a very intelligent fungus. They set up small sources of food that mirrored subway stations in Tokyo's infrastructure. Tokyo has an insane subway infrastructure. And the cordyceps, this fungus, I don't know if this one was a cordyceps, but it was a fungus, had first seemed to be spreading out wildly because it was looking for food. Once it started to locate the food, it started to reconstruct itself to prioritize getting food, nutrients, and having an organized system of bringing in the food. So it eventually became so sophisticated that it was a better system than Tokyo subways.
I did read that.
It's extremely intelligent. That's just a fascinating little thing to think about. Another one, rapidly spreading fungus, already in California. I know, right? Like this is just like
Now you're fearmonger.
I know, right? I know, like the way that this got lined up. At first, I thought it was gonna be fascinating, and now I'm just like, you know what? Now I kind of feel bad because somebody's gonna freak out. And the whole point of this is to be informed, not to fearmonger. So I don't want someone to just freak out and be like, "Shamar said the end of the world is tomorrow." That's not what we're saying. But this is something to watch. This is something to be aware of. Some of these things are completely unpreventable, and that's one of the things. Like you have to have faith. Really, it is hard. We're in Babylon. We're constantly being disconnected. I just read some of the stories in the scriptures and think about how our forefathers were just speaking to the Most High, like speaking to Him. We don't know whether to approach extremely shamed. Should I say anything at all? Should I pray this? Should I pray that? Should I even ask for this? We're so disconnected. We don't even have that type of relationship anymore. But we are still always being put in positions, have more faith. This is not working out. Have more faith. Have faith. Have faith. And that's the biggest thing here is you have to have faith. And like we all need to grow our faith because we need it. All these things that are happening, all these things that are completely unavoidable. You could be the most calculated, precision type of person in the world, but you can't prevent everything. You got 100 pounds. You go in an underground bunker that's got no type of life in it outside of the people you invite in. You've got 1 million pounds of food, and then there's cordyceps in your sugar. And then now you guys are just zombies locked in a bunker. I mean, it's an innumerable amount of things that could happen, and none of it is in our control. And here's just another example because another rapidly spreading fungus is already in California. 27 other states presents an urgent threat. A fungus that poses an urgent antimicrobial resistance threat, which means they can't kill it the way that they normally would. According to the CDC, has already been detected in more than half of U.S. states. It's at least in 26 states. Candida auris, or C. auris, is so concerning because it is often resistant to antifungal drugs. So it's a fungus, making it hard to treat infections. It can also be hard to identify with standard lab tests, making it even more difficult to treat properly and early. The fungus was first detected in the US in 2016. The fungus spread at an alarming rate between 2020 and 2021 in healthcare facilities. The CDC wrote in a memo released Monday and has continued to spread in 2022. Well, what happened in 2020 and 2021? COVID.
Oh.
So this fungus could easily be riding on the back of a virus, and while you're going to the hospital saying, "Oh my God, doc, I feel sick. I have shortness of breath. I have shortness of breath. I can't breathe. I'm going through this. I'm going through that. Doc, I need you to check this out." The entire time, they're not even testing for cordyceps. They're not testing for any kind of fungus. They're not even aware that this is something that they should be looking for because they're treating you for COVID. It's just insane. And it's happening all the time. It's spreading, and they said it was spreading in the care facilities. If it was going to be detected and stopped anywhere, it would have been there, and they didn't even notice it. And now in 2022, it rapidly spread. Here we are in 2023, they're saying it's an urgent problem because they're like, uh-oh. By the end of 2022, there were more than 8,000 instances of Candida auris infected across 28 states and Washington, D.C. The map below shows confirmed cases of the fungus, with states shaded in red having the most infections. California heavily infected, Nevada heavily infected, Texas heavily infected, Florida heavily infected. What is that? Wait a minute. The whole two letters things.
It's always, it never ceases to amaze me how little Californians know about the rest of the country.
Look, listen. First off, you know what? That's not what this is about. New York. Yeah. And I wanted to confirm, because one thing I don't want to do is just be all sure, and then someone's like, man, look at this guy.
You don't know what he's talking about.
And even Hawaii's got yellow, which means it's already infected people in Hawaii. Now, mind you, they're not full-blown zombies yet, but they do have this stuff in their blood. Well, not yet. Hold on. Listen. When I tell you that show was so practical and possible, like, it wasn't insane. Like, you know, World War Z was like all super insane and created super people. Like, these people were normal, right? They could still bleed, they could still be shot, they could still even be killed. They were just being piloted by this fungus. Right. And you already have thousands of cases in all these states. More than likely, this fungus in their blood is simply looking for a way to take over. It's learning their system. It's probably riding on the connections of their nerves, which go through your entire body, and it's infecting that just like it would in ants and spiders. Again, I mean, at this point, it is a lot to fear. I ain't even gonna lie to you. Like, this is wild. I'm fascinated by it, and it's a certain degree of terrifying, but at the same time, it's like, you can't do anything about these things. Don't sit up here and be like, oh, he's fear-mongering, he's doing this, he's doing that. I'm literally reading these articles, and I'm showing you the statistics that already exist. Will it create quote-unquote zombies? I don't know. Does it have the potential to? Sure. And you don't really know what's going to be the outcome. Is it going to infect people's systems, make them really susceptible to other diseases? Is it going to ride on the backs of other viruses and illnesses and become a superbug? Is it going to take over like a normal cordyceps does? We really don't know, but we do know that there are thousands of people who are already infected, that we're just going to wait and see after it incubates what it becomes. Oof. It says, while it usually isn't a significant threat to healthy people, the CDC said, Candida auris outbreaks are a big threat in healthcare settings where the fungus can enter patients' bloodstreams and cause severe deadly infections. So I think infections ride on the back of it more than it rides on the back of infections. Sick people, those staying in hospital long term, and patients with invasive medical devices like catheters or IVs are most vulnerable. So it's not like going to a hospital is going to particularly help. In fact, that's probably going to put you at more of an exposure and more of a risk.
Absolutely.
The strain put on the healthcare system by the COVID-19 pandemic may have allowed the fungus to spread more quickly. So it probably is riding on the back of like COVID-19, all these other different things. And so all of us that had COVID at one point or another more than likely have more than likely have some degree of this fungi in our bloodstream. Let's go over to the next one. Another silent pandemic warning from WHO, the World Health Organization. Bacteria killing too many people due to antimicrobial resistance. And mind you, this Matthew 24:7, it talked about the pestilences, the various different diseases, the sicknesses that would come out. We're seeing these things.
Are we still looking at the WHO as a credible source for?
If nothing else, statistically, yes. Yeah, I think statistically, the fact that they're tracking these things, I'm not going to say all their quotes and statements do I agree with. I do know that there is a certain level of we can't let the masses panic. We can't let this happen. We can't let that happen. There's a certain level of politics that go into it, but statistically, do I believe a lot of these things? Yes.
Oh.
The World Health Organization is warning of a silent pandemic of antimicrobial resistance from infections caused by deadly pathogens that doctors are not able to cure because of lack of novel agents. That's according to an early release of special presentations by Dr. Valeria Gigante and Professor of an online pre-meeting of the European Congress of Clinical Microbiology and Infectious Disease on April 15th to 18th in Denmark. Antibiotic resistance is one of the major concerns in modern medicine today, Dr. Aaron Glatt, Chief of Infectious Diseases at Mount Sinai South Nassau Hospital on Long Island, New York, told Fox News Digital. Ain't that crazy how they be using these scriptural names and Saint this hospital, Saint that, Mount this hospital? Yeah, I know, right? Like, and the crazy part about it is a lot of our people trust in Esau for information. You trust his medicine. You think he's so incredible. He can do all these things.
Go ahead. No, you got it.
No, I was gonna say they can't save us.
That's one of the things that I really wanted to touch on and highlight over the last 3 articles that we read. As far advanced as we like to think modern medicine is, things are still coming out that modern, the most skilled and most advanced sciences and medicines don't know how to handle. So understand where you are putting your trust. Understand where you're putting your faith. Understand that if you're putting your trust and your faith in man, you're gonna lose.
It says some 5 million deaths are associated every year due to antimicrobial resistance, according to the release. 5 million people die a year. A huge number, right? That's a number that I wasn't imagining at all. More than 2.8 million antimicrobial resistant infections occur in the U.S. every year, and more than 35,000 people die as a result. Woo! So, and they go into the new drugs and how they have hope. We're on our tray, and I don't even want to. Here's another one, bacteria. What's to fear about warming oceans? Flesh-eating bacteria. And it's crazy because it's crazy how Esau is so divided against themselves. A house divided against itself cannot stand. You have those that are like the tree huggers, the hippies, all these negative connotations that were warning about saving the earth. And now all these things that are a result of the earth suffering are destroying the people in it. And how many movies are based on that concept? People are a plague, and the earth is like an ecosystem. And like any ecosystem, it develops antibodies. And sometimes those antibodies are creatures. Sometimes those antibodies are fungus. But there's always been this common narrative in movies and shows, series, whatever, that the earth was going to defend itself against people and that people were a plague that it was tired of. And so here we are seeing all these things come out of the earth, all these bacteria and fungi, things that the Most High has already created. And who knows how long they've been set up and incubating, growing, so that during right now in this time, the Most High ordained for these things to start sprouting, spreading, and killing as we're getting towards the end. Scriptures talk about there's going to be so many bodies, there aren't people to bury them. Talks about it. So how much closer are we getting to this time? See if I can find that real quick. It just read Second Ezra 15. Read all of it. Read that entire chapter. All the things that it says are going to happen in this end time. We're gonna wrap this up because we only have a couple minutes. We have like 4 or 5 more articles.
Second Ezra 15, verse 1. Behold, speak thou in.
Oh no. We're not gonna read the entire thing.
okay.
No, I was gonna say we don't have time. It's 63 scriptures in that chapter. So go on your own. No. Go on your own time and read Second Ezra chapter 15. We're gonna just hit a couple of key topics in these last few articles. Then we're gonna close it out. Potentially deadly infections from a type of flesh-eating bacterium could significantly increase in the decades ahead as climate change causes oceans to warm and helps the organisms spread into new coastal areas. A study published Thursday in the journal Scientific Reports found that infections caused by Vibrio vulnificus along the eastern coast of the U.S. could double in the next 20 years, particularly as warmer sea surface temperatures enable the flesh-eating bacterium to thrive in waters further north than ever before. While V. vulnificus infections are still rare, the findings provide further evidence of how human health and the health of the planet are inextricably linked. Let me see. Let me hit a couple of these key points. This bacteria thrive in warm and shallow coastal waters, and infections typically peak in the summer months. People can become infected through cuts or other lesions in the skin that come into contact with seawater. A nasty little bug because infections spread rapidly, and the bacterium can severely damage a person's flesh. He added that 1 in 5 cases is deadly, and that many patients require amputations to survive. So 1 in 5 can't be prevented entirely, and I don't know what percent require amputations. Get a cut in your foot, you walking on the ocean floor, a little piece of glass, ouch, that hurt. Flesh-eating bacteria gets in, they're like, okay, well, in order to save your life, we have to take a below-the-knee amputation, above the knee. We have to take this limb so that it doesn't continue to spread. Let me see. Oh, the researchers used data from the U.S. CDC and prevention. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, which is the CDC, infections from 1988 to 2018. The scientists focused on reported cases along the East Coast, which Lake said is known to be a global hotspot for such infections. The study found that infections increased from 10 to 80 a year over the 30-year period, and that cases were occurring in new regions. Everything's getting hotter. We just talked about the heat wave that swept through LA last year. 107, like those are Florida temperatures. Those are down south temperatures, Middle East temperatures. And that's what's causing this bug to be able to survive, this bacterium to be able to survive in different climates. Everything's getting hotter. It's able to adapt. Let's go to this next one. Matter of fact, before we do that, do you have anything that you want to comment? 2 hurt as tornadoes damaged dozens of structures, snapping beams, and ripping off a roof. And it says 2 hurt again. So this was in Montebello. And that's probably, like 11 miles from where we are right now? Everybody's been coming to California. Like, yeah, California has good weather, but this is, without being specifically stated, this has always been a safe space. California probably has the least amount of natural disasters out of most of the states. You're not really going to, yes, we're by the coast, but we don't get hurricanes. We're by the coast, but we haven't seen tsunamis in a long time. We're by volcanoes that hardly ever erupt. There's just a whole bunch of dormant, for lack of a better word, weaponry that is right under the surface in California that most of the time Californians were able to avoid. You get an earthquake here and there, and sometimes we'll go years without a significant earthquake, and then sometimes they're huge and they're very strong. But a lot of times, we're not facing that on a consistent basis. We don't have I think there is an earthquake season, but it's not like the same with like Florida. I think like the southern states get hit like every year. You know what I mean?
Guaranteed.
Yeah, California is not getting hit like that, but now it's happening. This safe space that has always been regarded as the golden state, the best place to be. All these people who are coming to California, giving their bottom dollar and selling everything they have to be here, now all these plagues are coming here too. And the tornado in Montebello is an example. On Wednesday afternoon, this was literally yesterday, Misela Vargas stood in front of her Kia Telluride, which she'd parked near her workplace in Montebello. I don't know if that's how you pronounce that. Forgive my pronunciations, but I mean, you guys can see it. Telluride, Kia Telluride. It says, unfortunately for Vargas, who lives in Whittier, it seemed unlikely that she would be able to drive the vehicle home. On top of her car and several others was a massive leafy section of a tree thrown there by a tornado that touched down in the area Wednesday afternoon. Oh, there's footage. Oh, the advertisement. So it's strong enough to have ripped limbs off of trees. Her car, she said it was covered by something. She probably wasn't going to be able to go home.
Rip rooftops off.
Yeah, rip rooftops off. Let's see what we got here. We got 21 seconds of footage. Sheesh. Now, mind you, this is California. This isn't Texas. This isn't somewhere that's accustomed to having tornadoes.
The Midwest.
Right. This is the Golden State itself, California. Not even far from where we are. And this is probably not even like the most powerful tornado. It wasn't humongous. Look at that. I mean, that was the video. It wasn't humongous. It wasn't those huge, scary-looking cyclone F4 and F5s that you see in the South that they have hours to realize are coming. That happened practically instantly, and it was nearly invisible. If you weren't like on that street, you would probably have no idea that was happening. That's not it's above a power line, sure, but that's not huge. And it did a lot of damage quickly. It don't even look like the stuff is moving that fast. Woo. Man, oh man. Okay, we're really going to breeze through these. We have 5 minutes. Nearly 200 banks at risk for same fate as SVB. So if you didn't hear, the Silicon Valley Bank, and I think Silicon Valley is very rich, right? Yeah, it's extremely rich, right? They lead in education and quite a few things in California.
The bank in particular was this was the bank that a lot of the silicon tech companies use. So they were one of the biggest issue with this bank was that it wasn't diversified. All of its monies was in tech.
And maybe that's why you see Amazon laying off, I don't know how many thousand. You saw Facebook lay off a few thousand. You saw, let me see, Amazon, Facebook. Who else laid off a few thousand? A couple of big companies recently that have been constantly hiring and constantly expanding recently laid off thousands of people. I think Amazon laid off like 9,000 people. That's an insane amount of people, but now it all makes sense because if they were running all their money through SVB, they lost it.
No. So to be even clearer, it was small tech companies and startups that it was mostly funding.
Oh, okay.
When those go belly up, it's a couple of things, right? When your tech companies aren't doing as good as they used to be, right? And also, when it's a chain effect, right? So when people find out that this bank is having difficulties, right? They want to go withdraw their money. When they go to withdraw their money, because of how the banking system works, they don't have everyone's money to give them all at once, right? You gotta, because they're using that money to make more money, right? So they don't have it at hand to give people. So that's one of the reasons why a bank will collapse, because they don't have the money. They don't have the money to keep up with the demand of their customers asking to withdraw their money.
What bank was it? I don't know, maybe like within the past decade, 5-10 years, there was another bank that happened with?
It was a couple. There was the big tech collapse in 2000. I don't recall exactly, but yeah, there was another one or two banks that collapsed basically because of the same thing, where they just didn't have the money to. Something happened. Companies decided people decided they want to pull their money out of the bank. The bank didn't have the money to cover all the withdrawal demands, and that's when a bank collapses.
And mind you, I think in this past week there were 3. There was a Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and there was one more. I think the U.S. Bank is at a huge risk right now, but there are nearly 200 other banks that are potentially at risk of this same thing. There are 186 banks across the country that could fail if half of their depositors quickly withdrew their funds. That's half. Not a huge percent. I mean, that is a big percent, but like they don't have half of the money they're supposed to at any given time. Even insured depositors, those with 250,000 or less in the bank, could have problems getting their cash if these institutions face the sort of run that SVB saw a week ago. And it's crazy that they would even produce an article like this because this will make you want to go withdraw your money, which is exactly the problem. But I mean, hey, this is America, and literally we're watching live the implosion of America. You're watching it being destroyed from the inside. It says the concern is that these banks hold a significant amount of their assets in interest rate sensitive financial instruments like government bonds and mortgage backed securities. The value of these older low interest investments dropped sharply as the Federal Reserve hiked interest rates over the past year. So all of these banks are potentially at risk because they basically, none of them have the money at the same time. And a lot of the systems that are established in America are all established based on the idea that people are basically going to cooperate. Money is a promissory note, not backed by gold like it's supposed to be. And that's exactly why the US dollar has been dwindling more and more and more because there's less and less gold that's actually backing that dollar. And so money only has as much value as you place on it because it's no real system in place that holds value to that money. So the banks only work as long as everyone decides to play nice and not withdraw their money simultaneously. It says, get ready, more blackouts are coming. Normally, Scott Gann's air conditioning kept his house in Columbus, Ohio, cool during the increasingly hot summer days. But in June, as the heat index climbed to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, Gann, along with 600,000 Ohioans, suddenly lost power, leaving him to sweltering in his home. It's just a different kind of experience when you're at your house trying to sleep and it's literally 95 degrees.
No, it's. I've experienced it. It's terrible.
Oh wow, that sounds pretty terrible. And they don't have power. So that was 600,000 people. That was in Ohio. But keep in mind, first of all, there's a lot of tech companies and a lot of innovation that happens in California. You have like mining farms, data mining, right? So you got Bitcoin farms out here, you got mining farms out here, and they're literally just buildings, sometimes even warehouse levels of buildings that are a bunch of computers all generating codes, essentially trying to guess the code to a Bitcoin and then give its owner access, which will then make them about, 50,000. Well, Bitcoin's now like 24,000. So it's like a $24,000 richer. So it sounds like a worthy investment. You're paying $4,000 or $5,000 for the warehouse per month. You're running who knows how many hundred, maybe thousands of computers, but they generate an insane amount of heat, which has to be cooled. So you have to use an insane amount of power to power the farm. But if you have the money, it's no problem. But now money is no longer the issue, and that's been the whole system of America. You can have this if you have money. But because everything and everybody has been for profit, it's destroying the infrastructure. It's destroying the system. And now people have plenty of money, and the money's becoming worthless because the system itself cannot actually keep up. It says, this might have been considered a once-in-a-lifetime event in the past, but mass blackouts are starting to become a more regular feature of modern American life. Power outages have increased 64% from the early 2000s, and weather-related outages, many driven by the worsening climate crisis, have increased 78%. Let me see. But it's not just nature making our grid shakier. A system that was once largely controlled by localized public entities, people who live there that really want to see the grid work because they rely on it, has been handed over to layers of regional authorities and private companies whose goal is maximizing profits, not reliability. As a result, our electrical system has been plagued by decreasing reliability, lagging maintenance, and soaring costs. So you're paying more for less. That's the issue. You're going to pay more for less. So the climate, the intense heat, the natural disasters, weather outages, storms, all those things, they already put a strain on the system. Then you have people who are not actually invested, who private company that wants profit. All right, let's hold off on this maintenance. It gets conducted how often? I don't need it that much. Let's shrink that down to this. Let's cut this. Let's do that. And then you have a system that can't maintain its own weight. And that's exactly what's been happening. Dang, I wanted to get to this one. I probably won't get to this last one. Frozen fruit was recalled at Costco for hepatitis A risk. That's something if you're interested to look up. We're not going to actually get to that one because for the sake of time, we're going to finish up with this one. Let me see. You give me that Psalms, who frameth mischief by law. So this is a new law. I think it was California. Expert sounds alarm on new law that allows minors to change gender without parental consent. And it says Spain's new law allows children as young as 12 to legally change gender with a judge's authorization. So you don't actually, so all these transgender, and this is one of the things that we were talking about, drunk on the wine of Babylon. It first and foremost, it's already horrible and just an incredible level of wickedness for a man to say, I don't feel like being a man, I don't want to be a man, I want to be a woman, and for there to actually be a doctor that will conduct the surgery to take a man and turn him as much into a woman as they can get him. But now that's been available for minors. And originally, I think you had to be 18. Then they dropped it to 16 with parental consent. Now, some kids as young as 12, they're not even developed. But that's the earliest stage in their pubescence where if you change it then, they probably, because that's the transgender thing. They always have big jaws and big old burly shoulders. Like, you're very clearly still a man, just with some installations. Now they're saying kids as young as 12, without their parents even knowing, how was school today? Oh, it was fine. Whole time they went to a doctor because they're talking about a sex change, getting documents, having it signed, going to a judge behind their parents' backs. The judges are saying yes, and then all of a sudden your kid comes up missing or isn't home for 2 weeks, or you get a notification after the fact that your son decided he wanted to be a girl, or your daughter decided she wanted to be a boy, and they're all at 12 years old, still in your house. They're going to come back and eat your food and live in the room that you give them and use your lights and run your water, but they have the right to change their entire bodies and anatomy when they decide to.
They don't even have the wherewithal to get their tails into bed at a decent time.
Right. They're kids.
Right.
You shouldn't give a kid this much power. You shouldn't. Imagine, I just think about, all the instances. Some kids maybe really are going to be influenced by America, really are going to be mentally ill at that young, and really are going to stick with that decision. Many of them are going to regret they're going to regret it so bad.
I believe the number is around 80% regret the gender change by the time they're early an adult.
80% regret it. But yet they're still taking these. Come on, now everybody knows a teenager is they're usually less stable. They're going through all these hormonal changes. Their brains are changing. Their bodies are changing. They're experiencing all these different aspects of life. All these expectations come to them, responsibilities, younger siblings. And then you give them the right as young as 12 to change their gender. You always tell me I'm acting like a girl anyway. I might as well. Come on, man. Then they're going to get older and they're going to realize, oh, I should have never done this. And then is it reversible? I think they focus more on the surgery being possible than a reverse. I don't think there's a reverse. I don't see how you can cut it off and then put it back. No. A transgender clinical psychologist raised concerns about a potential unexpected consequences from a bill recently passed in Spain that allows individuals as young as 12 to legally change their gender. Spanish lawmakers recently passed a law that permits minors between 12 and 14 to change their legal gender with a judge's authorization, and those between the ages of 14 and 16 can do so without psychological or other medical evaluation, but still need parental consent. So if you're 12 to 14, they have to have a psychological evaluation, but who knows how extensive that is, or if there's some gay doctor, transgender doctor, because everybody knows that's usually how it goes. If you work, you do construction, you got hey, I got a guy. You go to him, you tell him this, he'll put you on disability. Hey, you do this, I got a guy. You go here, you say this, they'll do this. I can get you approved for this. There's always someone in some place. So there's got to be some gay doctor, some transgender doctor out there that's just going to be approving every kid that walks in. Oh, there's nothing psychologically wrong with this 14-year-old little girl that wants to be a man. There's nothing psychologically wrong with this 12-year-old boy who wants to be a girl. Oh, they're perfectly fine. Give it to them. And they'll have the right to do that. Children will come home an entirely different, at least anatomically, person than they left. Anyone over the age of 16 can legally change their gender regardless of parental consent under the new law. That's pretty young, Dr. Erica Anderson, who practices clinical psychology in Berkeley, California, told Fox News Digital. Anderson, who identifies as a transgender woman, has 40 years of clinical experience and served as a board member for the World Professional Association for Transgender Health from 2019 to 2021. I'm concerned that many young people are sort of caught up in the excitement about sexual and gender minority labels and might be adopting ideas about themselves that might not last.
This is interesting, right? I want to draw a really quick parallel. When I was younger, right, when I was, 11, 12, 13, this was, I don't want to, reveal my age, but the thing that was kind of new and popular was, especially in school, was like kids with parents who was getting divorced. And like that was becoming more prevalent in my schooling. At one point, I recall thinking to myself, oh, it would be cool to be one of those kids with divorced parents, right? Then my parents got divorced. And I was like, oh, this is not nearly as cool as I thought it would be. It's not cool at all, actually. I don't want this. But the parallel is, like, as a child, you do get caught up in things that seem exciting because it's different.
We having 2 Christmases.
Right.
Yeah, I heard a lot of that.
Right.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, given some time, given some wisdom, given some understanding, odds are the excitement will wear off, and that child will grow to realize and understand that this was just a fade. This was just this isn't what you actually wanted. You got it?
Can we finish out with that scripture that frameth mischief by law?
Come on. This is Psalms 94, verse 20. Shall the throne of Salakia, shall the throne of iniquity have fellowship with thee, which frameth mischief by law?
This is wicked. This is mischief. I mean, the fact that these kids, and mind you, I was surprised to hear that this is Spain, but again, this is another country drunk off the wine of Babylon that are giving in. And this is why you have countries like the Middle East, that will go to war with America for decades about not allowing America to have its way with its citizens. Then, when you see the result of this, you start to be like, hold on, this started to make sense. They went to war so that they can maintain their culture that has been there for hundreds of thousands of years. They went to war to make sure that their men could be men, their girls could grow up into women, that they could still have tradition, culture, law, and something established. Don't let the propaganda and the media fool you. There's always this, woman that's being so badly abused, and statistically, suicide rates are higher in men. I think even domestic violence is very close between men and women. All these men that get punched, and they punch a woman back, then other dudes come and, beat them up. You have a lot of these things that are constantly produced through media and propaganda that are not reality. So you see a whole lot of these stories as if their way of life is so terrible, but they've been existing. They've been established. They're not having these type of issues. They don't have insane obesity, insane diabetes, insane cancer rates. They don't have insane suicide rates. They don't. Everybody makes a joke about a suicide bomber, and you do not hear about constant suicide in their country. You hear about a few religious zealots that will go in somewhere and blow themselves up to show their faith to their God. But the few of them that do that versus the insane rate of suicide in America, where you have a suicide hotline all over the place, billboards, bus stops, at the train, thinking about killing yourself, call us first. And it's really not about preserving life. It's about you're going to jam this train up with your body. Please don't do that. Call us and we'll try to. No one's going to get to work on time if you throw yourself under the train for a quick death.
It's going to be a major inconvenience.
Right. Your death is going to be a major inconvenience. So they'll put the suicide hotline everywhere, all over the bus stop, the train stop, all over these billboards as you driving down the street. Don't make a mess.
We got people that need to work.
Right. We got the rest of us got to keep going. They frame in mischief by law, man. So hopefully this has been edifying. I know we touched on a lot of things, and again, we apologize for starting late. But we hope that this has still been edifying, still been fascinating, still been something that you can take away from, and still something that's going to install fear, and from that fear, an increase of faith, because that's the only thing that's really going to save us. The Most High is deciding who lives and who dies. He's in control of all of these things. You can't prevent it all. You can't combat it all. You can't control it all.
You can't hide from it. You can't run from it.
None of that. So, again, Most High willing, this has been edifying Israel. With that, we are going to say Shalom and stick to the script.
Like and share the classes. Tell your loved ones. And tap in with us. Continue to, watch our classes. We have classes almost every night of the week. Tap in, like, share, and join.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Production.